Hope everyone is doing great. Today, we're diving into a high-octane action thriller Sisu Part 2. Now, if you haven't seen the first installment, don't worry, you won't be lost. While it follows the same legend, this chapter stands on its own. I've dropped a link to the first film in the description, so feel free to catch up later. But for now, let's jump right in. The war is over, and the legendary soldier Atami Korpi is living in a new, quieter corner of Finland. But his heart is still back home, the land now under Russian control. Korpi is a man of few words and deep attachments, and he's obsessed with one mission: to return to his old homestead, reclaim the original timber from his family's house, and rebuild his legacy on his own terms. He heads toward the border, and when the guards check his documents, their faces go pale. They know exactly who they're looking at. The legend of Korpi precedes him. They are paralyzed with fear, and they let him pass, instantly radioing their superiors that the ghost has returned. Korpi reaches the ruins of his home, but deep inside the Russian military compound, the general hears the news. He immediately summons a prisoner named Igor. The tension in the room is suffocating. We learn that Igor is the man responsible for torching Korpi's village and slaughtering his family years ago, the very atrocity that triggered the rampage where Korpi single-handedly took out 300 soldiers. The general is terrified. He knows Korpi isn't here for sightseeing. He's here to finish something. He makes a deal with Igor. Bring me Korpi's head, and you'll walk out of here a free man. Igor, arrogant and blinded by his own ego, thinks it's an easy kill. He figures, what can one man do against an army? Meanwhile, Korpi is standing in the ashes of his past. He finds a tattered family photo, his wife, his 2 children, and the stoic, iron-willed warrior finally breaks, his grief pouring out in the silence of the ruins. But he quickly composes himself. This isn't a funeral. It's a mission. He meticulously marks the best logs of his old home, loads them onto his truck, and sets fire to the rest, leaving nothing but dust behind. As he drives back toward the Finnish border, a police car pulls him over. He stays cool, calm, and collected. The officer checks his ID, but through the side mirror, Korpi spots a second patrol car pulling up. His instincts sharpen, he knows he's been set up. The soldier walks toward the rear vehicle, clutching Korpi's papers, and as he presents them to the man waiting in the shadows, the trap finally closes in. It's Igor. Igor stares at the papers, his eyes narrowing. This is the man the general wants dead. The man who earned his freedom if he can just pull the trigger. Igor has heard the legends, but he wasn't there when the killing started. He was rotting in a cell. He looks at the back of the truck, at the salvaged timber, and sneers. He thinks Korpi is just an old man clinging to the past, a man fueled by sentimentality rather than survival. With a cold, calculated wave of his hand, Igor orders his men to douse the timber in gasoline and burn Korpi alive, along with his precious wood. One of the soldiers steps forward, a Molotov cocktail in hand. He creeps toward the tailgate, ready to strike, but Korpi is faster than light. As the soldier nears the door, Korpi kicks it open with brutal force, slamming it into the man and drenching him in the fuel. In a heartbeat, the soldier is a human torch, screaming as he collapses. Before Igor can even process the carnage, Korpi slams the truck into full-throttle reverse. The vehicle rockets backward, sending another soldier flying like a ragdoll right onto the hood of Igor's car. The chaos is absolute. The third soldier raises his rifle, but Korpi is already there. He snatches the barrel, yanks the man into the cab, and slams the truck into gear. The soldier is paralyzed with terror, but Korpi doesn't kill him. He knocks him unconscious. When the man wakes, he finds a rifle pressed against his chest and a command in his ear: load it. Shaking with fear, the soldier obeys. Korpi hits the brakes, stopping the truck dead. Igor's men, disoriented and lagging behind, kill their engines, trying to make sense of the sudden silence. That's when Korpi shoves the soldier out. The man sprints toward his own lines, but to Igor's men, he's just a liability, a traitor. They gun him down in cold blood. That was Korpi's move. He wasn't just freeing a hostage, he was tracking the enemy. He hears the gunfire, pinpoints their positions, and in a blur of motion, he opens fire. One by one, the soldiers drop. Igor watches, stunned, as his men are dismantled. Korpi steps out of the truck, weapon leveled. Another man in the car makes the mistake of reaching for his gun. Igor tries to warn him, but it's too late. A single shot rings out and the man falls. Igor stays perfectly still. He knows the rules of this dance. Korpi doesn't kill without a reason. Korpi eyes the car, takes aim, and shreds the tires with surgical precision, leaving Igor stranded. He climbs back into his truck and disappears into the distance. But Igor isn't finished. He calls in his biker squad. They arrive in force, and while they scramble to swap the tires, Igor prepares the hunt. He knows exactly where Korpi is headed. He knows the terrain. Soon, the roar of engines fills the air as they close the gap on the dirt road. Korpi hears them coming. He turns, his rifle cracking, but the soldiers are armored. The bullets ping harmlessly off their helmets. The chase has only just begun. The heavy lead tears through the cabin, and Korpi takes a hit. Blood stains his clothes, but he doesn't break. He veers the truck off-road into a field, steadying himself through the blinding pain before jerking the wheel to haul it back onto the tarmac. A soldier leaps onto the moving truck, but Korpi slams the brakes. The sudden inertia sends the man flying, and he disappears under the crushing weight of the rear tires. The assault doesn't let up. Another soldier draws a bead on him, but Korpi spots a parked wreck on the shoulder. He sideswipes it with the brute force of his truck, sending the frame careening into a biker. The bike disintegrates, the rider along with it. In the chaos, a third soldier manages to force his way into the cab, shoving Korpi out the door. He's left dangling, clinging to the exterior while a biker pulls alongside, leveling a weapon to end the legend once and for all. But Korpi is the storm. He lunges, rips a stick of dynamite from a fallen soldier's vest, and jams it into the spokes of the biker's front wheel. The bike leaps into the air and detonates in a fireball. Not missing a beat, Korpi grabs the heavy towing cable from the front of his rig. He whips it around the neck of the intruder still in the cab and kicks himself out. He scrambles back inside, hits the winch control, and the cable goes taut. The soldier is dragged toward the mechanism, and in one final, gruesome snap, his head is severed, landing directly on the hood of Igor's car. Igor is rattled, his composure finally cracking. He retaliates, lighting a Molotov and hurling it onto the truck's cargo bed. The timber ignites. Korpi sees his family's legacy, his house, turning to ash in the flames, and his rage reaches a boiling point. He spots a dead soldier still strapped with live ordnance. Without a second of hesitation, Korpi arms the grenades and hurls the body toward Igor's vehicle. Igor catches a glimpse of the flying corpse and dives from his car just as the blast turns it into a twisted wreck of steel. But Igor refuses to die. He's already calling in reinforcements, desperate to end the man who refuses to be broken. Korpi dives the truck deep into the dense brush of the forest. The thick branches tear at the truck, acting as a natural fire extinguisher against the spreading flames. He halts, giving his dog a drink and pouring the last of his water into the gasping engine to keep the monster running. He's weighing his next move when the sky changes. High above, two fighter jets scream across the horizon. They aren't just hunting him anymore. They're looking to erase him. Korpi scrambles, hauling his dog into the cab, and guns the engine. As the jets bank for a strafing run, Korpi veers hard, ducking the truck into the dark maw of a mountain tunnel. The pilots are blinded, the target lost in the concrete shadows, but Korpi knows the hunt is only becoming more lethal. The pilot drops the payload, but Korpi anticipates the strike. He punches the accelerator, clearing the blast radius just as the tunnel collapses behind him. He tears into the dense forest, believing he's finally shaken his pursuers. He's wrong. The second jet screams over the canopy, dropping low to rake the truck with machine gun fire. The massive stack of timber on the truck bed acts as a makeshift shield, soaking up the rounds. Korpi makes his move. He slams on the brakes with brutal timing. The jet, flying too low and too fast, clips the back of the truck with its wing. The impact is catastrophic. The plane cartwheels into the earth, erupting in a fireball that incinerates the pilot. Korpi pulls his damaged rig out of the wreckage, scanning the skies. When the second jet doesn't reappear, he pushes back toward the Finnish border. He finds himself on a narrow mountain pass, a deep gorge and a rushing river carved into the earth below. Suddenly, the jet rises from the depths of the gorge, strafing the road. Korpi weaves through the barrage, dodging death by inches. The pilot burns through his ammunition, the guns falling silent. Realizing he's out of lead, the pilot switches tactics. He banks hard, lining up for a final suicidal ramming maneuver. But Korpi is the master of survival. He unhitches the bracing ropes on his cargo. As the jet screams toward him, Korpi slams on the brakes. The momentum sends the timber flying forward like a colossal, wooden spear. The logs shred the jet's fuselage, and it detonates in midair just feet from the truck. The pilot ejects, drifting toward the ground on his parachute, landing squarely in Korpi's path. The pilot scrambles to find his footing, his hands trembling. He's so terrified he can't even raise his sidearm. Corpy advances, a relentless force of nature, but his progress is cut short by a haunting sound. The pilot starts to grin. Corpy glances back. A massive bomber is descending, darkening the sky. Corpy doesn't hesitate. He lunges back to his truck, frantically reloading the logs, and floors it. The bomber unleashes its payload. The earth shakes, and the shockwave shreds the surviving pilot into ribbons, though Corpy miraculously survives the blast. He knows he can't outrun the air support on solid ground. He veers the truck toward the cliff's edge and drives it straight into the frigid river below. As the cab fills with water, Corpy stays focused. He shoves his dog to the surface first, then hacks away the ropes binding the logs to the truck. Freed from the weight, the timber surges upward, carrying him toward the surface as the mission turns into a desperate struggle for air. The minutes tick by, and the crushing weight of the water drags him down. Oxygen deprivation takes hold, and his senses slip into the abyss as his body begins to sink into the dark, cold depths. But fortune favors the relentless. A massive beam of his home's timber floats beneath him, cradling his limp body and surging back toward the surface. He breaks the water, gasping for air, his loyal dog already paddling toward him in the current. The scene shifts to dusk. Igor and his hunters pace the riverbank, obsessed with one question. Is the legend dead, or is he waiting in the shadows? They scour the riverbed and find the sunken truck, stripped of its cargo and devoid of a body. Their realization is cold and absolute. Corpy is alive, and he's still coming for them. Miles away, Corpy has lashed the salvaged logs together into a crude raft, navigating silently to the shoreline. As he hits the mud, he spots a silhouette in the distance. A village, and discarded in the weeds, a derelict tank. He scavenges the wreck, finding a cache of munitions and explosives. He doesn't need a mission statement. He knows the wolves are closing in. Back at the Russian base, Igor is waiting, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Suddenly, the rumble of an engine tears through the night. A tank crests the ridge, the weathered timber of Corpy's home lashed to its hull like armor. Igor knows it's him. The order is given, and a hail of gunfire erupts, turning the border crossing into a kill zone. But Corpy has played this hand before. He triggers a charge tied to the tank's exterior, timing the blast for the exact moment of impact. The tank jumps, vaulting over the defensive line and slamming down safely on the Finnish side of the border. Igor stands frozen, stunned by the sheer defiance of the move. But the cost is heavy. The tank is a twisted heap of metal, and Corpy is shattered, bleeding out from wounds that would have killed a lesser man. He knows the end is near. He shoves his dog away, forcing the animal to run into the safety of the woods. He won't let the beast die in his final stand. He draws a knife, the blade already detached from the handle, a desperate, calculated choice. He drags himself from the wreckage, a wounded predator ready for the final strike. Igor raises his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger, but a voice cuts through the tension. It's the general. He has arrived to witness the trophy, and he wants the legend alive. The order rings out, and Igor's finger relaxes. They descend upon the broken warrior, dragging him through the dirt. Chained by their own ego, they hoist Corpy up, chaining him to the ceiling of a train carriage as it begins to rumble down the tracks. A soldier steps forward, his whip whistling through the air, carving deep, jagged lines into Corpy's skin with every strike. Igor dismisses the guard, stepping into the dim, flickering light to gloat. He leans in close, his voice cold and hollow, telling Corpy about the thousands he's slaughtered in the war, faces forgotten to time. But then he pauses. He mentions a child, a boy from Corpy's village who stood up to him with nothing but a kitchen knife, trying to protect his mother and brother. He describes the look in the boy's eyes, a reflection of the man hanging before him. The realization hits Corpy like a thunderbolt. This is the monster who ended his bloodline. Corpy's rage is a supernova, but his discipline is iron. He doesn't struggle, he waits. He shifts his weight, testing the frayed ropes binding his wrists, waiting for the moment Igor turns his back. As soon as he's alone, Corpy lets his entire body weight drop. The ropes snap with a wet thud, and he hits the floor. He reaches into the deep, crimson gash on his own thigh, a wound head deliberately ignored, and pulls out the razor-sharp blade head hidden there back in the tank. He knew he wouldn't win a brawl, but he knew he'd get a chance to bleed them. A guard rounds the corner, hearing the commotion. Corpy collapses instantly, playing dead. As the soldier steps closer, a boot heel away from his face, Corpy lunges. It's over in a heartbeat. a brutal, silent strike that leaves the guard headless on the floor. Corpy taps a rhythmic knock on the carriage door. The guard outside, expecting a colleague, peeks through the slit, only to be met by the sight of the severed head. Terror turns his blood to ice. He doesn't even draw his weapon. He turns and leaps from the speeding train into the darkness. Up ahead, Igor is oblivious to the slaughter. He's in the first-class carriage, nursing a drink with the general, demanding his blood money and his freedom. But the general is dismissive, and Igor, a veteran of 1,000 betrayals, senses the trap. He knows they have no intention of letting him walk away alive. Meanwhile, Corpy is moving like a shadow through the train. He passes a cargo carriage stacked with the charred, salvaged timber of his old home. The sight fuels his resolve. He swipes a set of grenades from a crate and continues, silently navigating a car packed with sleeping soldiers. He crosses the threshold into the next carriage, his every movement calculated and void of sound. But the train jolts. As he steps into the light of the next cabin, his eyes lock onto a soldier returning from the washroom. The silence is broken, and the hunt reaches its final, inevitable collision. Corpy doesn't waste a millisecond. He hurls the pickaxe, the metal bit finding its mark and silencing the soldier before he can even draw a breath. But the thud of the body alerts a nearby sleeper. Before the man can raise an alarm, Corpy is on him, a flash of steel ending the threat instantly. He pushes forward, but the train lurches violently. A soldier's wine bottle topples from a bunk, shattering into 1,000 jagged shards on the floor. It's a deafening crash in the silence, but the drunken soldiers remain in their stupor. Corpy is forced to crawl over the field of glass. The shards carve deep into his skin, but he doesn't make a sound. Suddenly, blood from his previous kill drips down onto a sleeping soldier below, rousing him from his haze. To avoid being spotted, Corpy dives beneath the bunk, pressing his body into the glass, the sharp edges biting into his flesh. As he tries to steady himself, his hand triggers a metal mouse trap. The snap is sharp, agonizing, but he doesn't flinch. Then the inevitable happens. The dead soldier above shifts, falling heavily onto the man below. The entire carriage erupts in chaos. Soldiers scramble, waking to the sight of a slaughter. Corpy blasts from under the bunk, lunging across the car to grab his pickaxe back from the corpse's face. In a blurred motion, he jams the heavy door shut, locking the remaining soldiers inside. The next carriage is a fortress. The guards are sober and alert. Corpy opts for the roof, crawling into the night wind. But in the pitch-black darkness, he misses a vent pipe, slamming into it with a brutal impact that tears through the roof, dropping him directly into the center of the squad. The room ignites with gunfire, but Corpy is a ghost in the crossfire. He weaves through the hail of lead, disarms the nearest guard, and turns their own weapon against them, clearing the room in a rhythmic, lethal dance. Behind the line, soldiers are still pouring fire into the cabin. Corpy grabs a fallen soldier, dragging him up as a human shield, shielding himself while he advances. The moment the enemy's fire falters to reload, Corpy raises both weapons, shredding the remaining guards in a wall of gunfire. The echoes reach the first-class carriage. Igor steps out into the corridor, hearing the carnage moving closer. He realizes the truth. Corpy is coming for blood. And the general? The general has already sold him out. The trap wasn't just for Corpy. It was for him too. And in that moment, Igor knows he's standing on the edge of a grave he helped dig himself. Igor realizes the writing on the wall. He isn't going to risk his life fighting a man who refuses to die, and he knows the general has already written him off. In a move of cold-blooded survival, Igor uncouples the engine and the first-class car from the rest of the train, leaving the carnage and Corpy behind. He marches back into the luxury cabin, where the general cowers, offering gold and promises to save his own skin. Igor just laughs, a hollow, bitter sound, and ends him with a single shot. He thinks he's won. He has the money, he's severed the train, and the legend is trapped in the wreckage behind him. But Corpy is not stopped by mere steel. He stares at the payload left in the rear carriage, a massive missile. He arms it, climbs onto the frame, and ignites the propellant. The force of the thrusters turns the abandoned carriage into a high-speed missile, hurtling down the tracks like a runaway bullet. It slams into the back of the detached first-class carriage with the force of an earthquake. Corpy vaults into the wreckage, and the final showdown begins. Corpy is broken, bleeding, and exhausted, and Igor dominates the fight, eventually throwing him back toward the primed missile. This is where Corpy plays his ace. He jams his blade into the locking mechanism of the missile's frame, fully activating the thrusters. The carriage erupts with kinetic energy, tearing away from the train and screaming toward the front cabin where Igor is trapped. Korpi rolls back to safety just as the carriage connects with the engine. The impact is terminal. The world turns white as the missile detonates, obliterating the carriage and turning Igor into a memory scattered across the landscape. 2 days pass. At the snowy Finnish border, a lone sentry stands guard in the biting cold. He hears the rhythmic clatter of wood on metal and sees a silhouette emerging from the haze. It's an old man, pulling a cart laden with seasoned timber. The guard moves to intercept, demanding identification. As his eyes catch the name Korpi, his hand rises in an instinctive, unwavering salute. Sometime later, the sun is shining on a quiet, peaceful village. Korpi is whole again, his hands steady as he hammers the final planks of his home, the very wood he bled for. His dog barks, ears perking up, and Korpi looks out to see a group of villagers approaching. He freezes, his hand dropping to the weapon at his side, expecting a fight, expecting the world to come for him one last time. But as they draw close, they don't raise rifles. They smile and ask, "Do you need a hand?" For the first time in his life, the soldier doesn't need to fight. The words hit him like a physical blow, and the iron-willed warrior breaks down, weeping for the simple, beautiful mercy of humanity. He finally has his home. He finally has his peace. And for Atami Korpi, the war is truly over.